I've forgotten.
I'm Adriana. I'm the other academic advisor. And like Renee said, I just started recording so we can share it with any of your cohort mates who might not have been able to attend, or in case you miss anything, because it's a lot of information. If you want to go back and refer to what we've said or what we show you, this will be a good way for you to look back on that. I think you're muted, Renee.
Myself when I unmuted myself. Sorry about that. So in our session, we're going to talk about filing to intend to graduate. So we'll talk a little bit about what you need to do with that, any commencement related info we have, some things about celebrating you that we do in the department, and then thinking about your next steps as you're moving beyond pursuing your degree and getting started in your field, and what that's going to look like for you. So we'll kind of go through that step by step, and then you guys can just jump in with any questions. So Adriana, you want to kick us off?
Sure thing. If you are a member of the summer 2021 group that is graduating, you've already filed your intent to graduate. This is geared more towards those graduating in fall. Yesterday, I sent out an email saying that you can finally apply to graduate. And to do that, you're going to go to your My UCF portal. You're going to The Student Center automatically populates usually, so you should see something that looks very similar to this. You're going to want to click on Other Academic, and then you'll see some options in the menu, and one of those is Intent to Graduate Apply. So you'll select this and it'll bring you to a new page where you're going to give some information about when you're graduating, what degree you're earning, and you'll also have the opportunity to fill out some UCF surveys. These don't automatically populate showing that you've completed them. So if you've done it and you don't see it say complete immediately, don't worry about it. It doesn't impact the submission of your intent to graduate. And you can always check with us to see if it was submitted properly. So be sure to do this by August 6th if you are graduating in the fall.
Right, and all you summer grads have already done this, so we've already double checked that, and everybody who's graduating this summer is good to go, right?
You are set. Yep. Commencement. The commencement ceremony information has been posted on the commencement website. Right now, we don't have any information for the fall 2021 celebrations, but we do know that they'll take place in December. We only know the date, but we don't know the day or the time for our particular college. So this information is geared more towards the people who are graduating in the summer, but it'll look very similar to what will happen in December. So there will be a grad walk option and a traditional commencement ceremony. You can go to one or to both. You're able to select this option. Um, the grad walk is a new thing that came up because of the pandemic, and it's kind of a cool thing that you get to do. You get to bring 8 guests, and you have the opportunity to either be in your graduation regalia or not, and you can walk across the stage, and your family can see you graduate. What you do is you reserve, I think it's a 15, or sorry, maybe an hour. I'm not sure about that. Renee clearly knows. She wrote the slide. So you will sign up for a slot of time, and then I'm not sure exactly how long it will take for you to proceed and all that stuff. But it's kind of a fun way to experience a commencement, not the huge celebration that's with your entire college. That is a one-time ceremony, and there's only one date for that, whereas grad walk has several different days and several different times. Our college is the College of Health Professions and Sciences. Um, they have their ceremony in conjunction with a couple of other colleges, like the College of Medicine. So it's not just social work. This is going to be for the whole college. This one's going to last longer. You have a limit of 5 guests. You get 5 tickets. And yes, infants, babies, they all count for a ticket. Anybody entering um, the ceremony counts as a ticket, even if they'll be sitting on a lap. This event is live streamed, so if your family cannot be one of those 5 guests that you bring or your friends, you can give them a link and they can watch you graduate, even if they can't be there in person with you. And cap and gown are required for that event.
Yeah, so the grad walk, I have heard it's like 15-minute time slots, but they're saying it takes about an hour from when you get there and check in and then move through that process. And they basically have a stage set up in the ballroom where they call your name, you get to walk, they have the photographer there. They have lots of all the fun things that they would have at commencement in terms of like UCF alumni swag and flowers and things like that will be there. With grad walk, there's not tickets. They just do a head count when you come. Commencement is definitely tickets and they're electronic. And then there's some other guidelines as well. So in terms of like wearing a mask and distancing and things like that. So definitely pay attention to those. I do know that our ceremony for the commencement on August 7th is in the evening. So it's later in the day. And there's lots that website. Here, I'll back up a slide so you can see it. It's like commencement.ucf.edu. That is being updated regularly. So those of you graduating this summer should have received an email yesterday with details. You need to decide which thing you're doing in terms of grad walk or commencement and RSVP by July 23rd. So you've got some time to sort of ask on the Facebook group to other cohorts that have had the chance to choose one of these options for more details about what it would be like. But you definitely want to make a decision by July 23rd if you're going to participate.
And then after
So,
August, they will update that commencement website with the information for fall. Sometimes you might see it before we do. We don't really get an alert that it's been posted. So we just refresh, just like you guys on that commencement site, for the dates and the times that come up.
right. So the thing that we do here in the program for each cohort is that we create a special commemorative presentation for each cohort. So, and this is where we need your help. So we ask each graduating student to create a PowerPoint slide with information about them. So we want you to have your name, where you live, any career goals, or where your first job is outside of grad school. You can add a message to your family and friends, a favorite quote, photos. They can be of you, your family, that sort of thing. So, and we don't have any parameters around this, so you can be as creative as you want. And Microsoft PowerPoint has tons of backgrounds and ideas. They even can generate slides for you if you put your stuff in. They'll kind of do layouts for you. So you can play around with that as much or as little as you want. What I ask is that you create that slide, just a single slide, and send me the PowerPoint by my email. You'll see it here. If you're graduating this summer, please send it to me by July 30th, and for fall grads, December 1st. And then we compile all of those together and put together a presentation that we upload to the advising portal just for your cohort. So it's not something that goes out on social media. It's just for you guys to share with your family and friends. So that's kind of how that works. And just to give you an idea, here's a few samples of ones that students have done in the past. Certainly one picture, lots of pictures, lots of text. It doesn't matter. I think the big thing for me is that you send me the actual PowerPoint file. Sometimes students try to share with me from their OneDrive, and I can't access them for some reason. It just never works. And then the other thing is that we please not use any animations because that sort of messes up our presentation timing. Am I forgetting anything, Adriana?
Nope, I don't think so.
So we try to time having this out around the time of commencement or right at the end of the program. And this kind of varies by cohort because there's always those last assignments that are due at the end. So you'll see like the deadlines are right around the end of the term. So sometimes that can be a little tricky because there's a lot going on. So, so you may see that we extend that deadline, but don't count on it because sometimes everybody's ready. So we'll be excited to see what you put together. So then kind of thinking about life after graduation and getting ready, now is the time to take advantage of your supports with career services at UCF. So once you graduate, alumni do not have access to career services the way you do as a student. So now is the time to start checking out that website. They will do virtual resume critique. So you can update your resume and meet with someone who'll give you some tips. They do it online in a session much like this, going line by line through your resume. And they also offer online workshops for interview skills, networking strategies, doing a job search. So there's a lot of resources that are available to you that can be really helpful, but you're going to want to start to think about looking into those now because, like I said, once you graduate, you won't have the ability to connect with those. Adriana, do you want to talk a little bit about licensure info?
Sure. Many of you, hopefully a lot of you, are looking to pursue licensure after you earn your MSW, and it's a little bit different for every state. We are very familiar with how Florida works. So if you have any questions about how to pursue licensure in Florida, we can give you pretty much step-by-step information on that. For other states, or even if you are in Florida and you don't know how to find it, Google is a great place to start. Just type in your state and LCSW. Some states have a different sort of listing for that. So you'll see Melissa Bermudez this afternoon, and she has an LCSW, but she also has an LCSIW, or is that correct? They're all a little different depending on the state, but a licensed clinical social worker is what we're talking about here. Another place to look is the ASWB, which is an excellent place. How to get a license. They also have a list of all the states, and if you click your state, you'll find the guidelines and all of the requirements needed in your state to pursue licensure. You can also look for your local NASW chapters. That's a good place to find licensure info for your state and a good place to find supervisors that you might need. But if you have any trouble finding things or you're just not sure what you're looking for or what you're reading, feel free to reach out to me and I'm happy to help. I'm getting more and more familiar with states outside of Florida as we have graduates all over the place. And so we're learning how to assist with pursuing licensure across the United States.
Yeah, I think I would add to that. So, just the process in every state is different, but they all seem to have generally the same criteria. So there's some sort of initial licensure that you can pursue as soon as you graduate. What they call that varies in every state. So here in Florida, it's a registered clinical social work intern. In other states, it might be a social work associate. It might be a licensed master social worker. There's several different titles that states use for that. So you'd want to find out what that is and what those criteria are. But typically, they're looking for you to have a master's degree in social work from a CSW accredited program, which we are, that you've done field placement in during your program, which you obviously have done. And then the national ASWB social work exam. So this varies by state. Each state has their own exam that they require. Some require an exam that's a master's level exam. Some require an exam that's a clinical exam. So that varies. And then initial licensure, you probably don't need anything else beyond that. To get the clinical social work licensure or independent social worker or the next advanced license, usually they're looking for you to have some sort of supervised practice after you graduate. So you would get a job and start working in the field and work with a supervisor to get professional development, much like you do now in your field placements. And then once the required amount of time has passed, you would be eligible for that clinical licensure. So, and that is the part that really varies the most by state, because some states it's a calendar period, some states it's a number of clock hours, some states require a combination of both. And the number of hours and number of months or years that must pass before you can be eligible vary by state. So that's sort of kind of like a general overview to give you an idea there. And So yes, so Zymar's got a question. You're moving in December, so filing, um, it is, oh yes. So when you file the intent to graduate, you will want to make sure that you go into your My UCF and make sure that everything is correct in there in terms of your name, the address, all of that. You want to make sure that everything is how it should be for when you graduate. So make sure your name is spelled correctly, make sure that the address that you want your diploma sent to is correct. And if you're not sure, they should forward the diploma, but I wouldn't take a chance on that. You can email the registrar, the UCF registrar, and ask them for clarification on that. So maybe in a second, I'll try to grab that address and put it in the chat for you guys. So, okay, moving on. So requesting transcripts. You want to talk about this, Adriana? I feel like this is always fun.
Yeah, sure. So when you need when you're looking to pursue your employment after graduation, or you are looking to get licensed in your state, whatever reason you might need your transcripts, you can make this request on My UCF. You'll go to the same place that we did the intent to graduate, click that other academic menu, and then you'll click on transcript request official. Your grades, your final grades will not post on your transcript. It varies. In the fall, there's not as many graduates. In the summer, there's not as many graduates. In the spring, there are a ton. So the timetable is a little bit different. It's much faster than getting your diploma. So I would say a couple of weeks after you've gotten your final grades, you can request your final transcripts. But what I would suggest is when you do go and do this official request, there's an option that tells you to hold for degree. And that means that they're not going to release your transcripts until they're final. And so until those final grades post, until your MSW degree is conferred, they won't release those transcripts. So you can go make your request now and click on hold for degree, and they should keep them until those final grades post. You probably will need multiple copies. There are ways of sending it electronically through the mail. It depends on wherever you need it to go. We don't have access to see if you've made a request. This all goes through the registrar's office, but it's pretty self-explanatory. Once you get to the form, you'll just fill it out with who you are and where you need it to go. Rebecca just asked, does UCF recognize honors at the master's level? They don't. We don't have Latin honors at the master's level, but if you were invited to be part of the Honor Society, the Phi Alpha Honor Society, they do have cords that they will give out for graduation. So, and then there's another organization, I think also another group that I might be forgetting, if you know what it is, Renee, that might have a cord or some sort of item that you can wear with the rest of your graduation regalia to indicate that you've gotten honors. You did not receive an invite. So the invites are sent out to students who are in the top 35% of the class, according to GPA at the end of the semester. You can definitely reach out to me, Rebecca, and I can check the list and see if you're on there. And then we can get you the information if you are. When you find out that information for licensure and you're ready to tell your state that you want to apply as a registered intern or whatever that classification may be, like Renee said, there's several different names for it. You'll want to submit an official request here. When you go to that form, you'll tell me who you are, what cohort you were in, when you graduated, and what state you're applying for licensure in. And I will, yep, right here is all the stuff that you need to include. And if I have any questions, I'll reach right out to you and say, do you want it sent to a specific email? Do you need it sent to the state? Do you need it sent to you and then you send it to the state? Everyone's a little bit different. So we'll collaborate on how that letter can get out to you. But to make your formal request, you'll want to use that link. And I'll go ahead and put it in the chat too, because sometimes it can be hard to find if you look for it on our website or if you just don't remember where it is. So this is a good place to save it. If you've already submitted it, some have for graduating in the summer. I've got it saved, but I can't send it out until final grades post. So if you've already submitted it, I have it. I'm just waiting to send it out. So you can definitely submit it ahead of time. I just need to wait until your graduation is official.
Wow, that was pretty quick. So let me just, we're all done. Okay, so the big thing is just making sure that you reach out to Adriana and I between now and when you graduate. Obviously, we're always available to you for questions. So any kind of the forms in terms of like intent to graduate, requesting a transcript, the letter that you would need for licensure, and then questions about commencement. Definitely Adriana is a great resource for that. And then remember that you're sending spotlight slides to me. And I can also talk to you about licensure as well. So those are kind of how we split the topics. But, you know, if you want to talk to one of us over the other, you can always do that. So I know a lot of you have been around a long time and worked closely with Adriana, so don't feel like that you can't ask her any questions about spotlight slides and licensure, because you sure can. So let's see. Have some
I'm just
questions in
going to
the
answer
chat. I
Kara's
was going to
question for
say,
everyone. Yep. So the practicum letter, that is the letter that I'm referring to. It's called a little different depending on the state, but the practicum letter is that verification letter I'm referring to. So if you're an advanced standing student, you might see that you need an advanced standing letter and a practicum letter. For Florida, we combine them, but you can make any request for a letter you need in that link. And then if I'm unclear on what it is, if they specify it as something that I'm not familiar with, I'll definitely work with you and find out with your state what they're looking for. But you can submit a link, a request at that link, and practicum letter is pretty standard. That's what I'm doing. I'm confirming that you attended and completed your practicum with us, your field internship, your clinical level, made sure that you did enough hours, that kind of thing, so that your state knows that you're prepared to move on. You're welcome.
yeah, so we have a couple minutes for questions. Ms. Bermuda should be joining us in just a few minutes, but if anybody has any questions about what we've covered so far, you can feel free to, I'm going to stop sharing my screen, and we will, let's see here, we can kind of, this way I can.
So Brandy in the chat has asked, did you say that we can request our transcripts before we graduate? Yes, you can. If you would like a copy of your transcripts without your final grades, you can request to have them released now, so you just have a copy. Or when you make your request, you can select hold for degree, and that means that the registrar's office will not release your transcripts until your final grades and your degree have posted. But you can certainly make the request ahead of time. Yes, I'll be making sure that the recording is available to everybody.
Lots of good questions today. Okay, so so Ms. Bermudez is here, so I'm going to let her kind of take the floor. I think it would be really great if you could talk to our students a little bit about what it was like for you when you first graduated with your MSW and got started pursuing licensure and all that sort of good stuff, and things that they might want to think about that maybe they didn't, that maybe like you wish you knew then, kind of things.
Of course, sure. So thank you for having me. I'm always really excited to get an opportunity to connect with you all outside of Canvas. It's very exciting for me. So as Renee kind of led up to what I'm here to share with you, I'm hoping that you can kind of learn and think about where you want to go once you have that important piece of paper in your hand, so the diploma. For me, I thought about my short-term and my long-term goals when it came to licensure, because as most of you are aware, you have to have X amount of hours, X amount of time, depending on the state that you're in. So it can help to look at what is it that you want to accomplish in that short time, but then even project yourself further than that. And I'll give you a more concrete example. For me, I knew that I wanted to have my clinical license under my belt, but I also was not 100% envisioning myself to having a clinical practice. So I wanted to give myself enough room to have that clinical foundational experience, but then open up other doors. I was really interested in doing macro level social work, but I knew that with my master's, if I got my license, I would be able to walk through those doors. So I think that's something to really consider. I am biased in thinking that our program really prepares you for the clinical world, but I want to also encourage you to kind of think beyond that. What is it that you want to do with that clinical license? Do you want to supervise other people? Do you want to do research? Do you want to do macro level work? Do you want to create new programs in your community? So something to just really think about. Social workers, I think sometimes we are very good at advocating and thinking about other people and our clients, but then putting our needs kind of comes last. And I think this is a perfect opportunity to really think about what you want to do with that license. My particular case, I had some really great mentors that helped me kind of see where is a huge growth edge for me. I had no experience in any type of medical social work. All of the work that I did was mental health related and with children's services. So my first job out of the gate was in hospice. And I did that on purpose because I, again, had no medical experience. And I also looked for an opportunity where they were doing supervision on site, and it was like a perk as an employee. So those were little tips that a mentor gave me that I'm sharing with you to think about when you're interviewing for positions or you're looking for positions. Is that something that's built in? Is that something that's going to challenge you and help you grow your skill set? The other thing that I picked up along the way was I had envisioned myself staying in Florida forever. And then my husband and I decided to relocate to DC, and I was almost at the tail end of getting all of my clinical hours. So, talk about just kind of like open, like jumping into a cold pool because I had to register as an intern in DC. I didn't know who to contact. And the best lesson I learned out of that was documentation was so key. I had another mentor who mentioned to me, even if you don't finish all your clinical hours, have your supervisor sign off on your forms, because your supervisor could move, your supervisor could retire, your supervisor could become part of some sort of federal agency. And I speak from experience. My supervisor moved to Poland, so I was not able to get a hold of her. So documentation is key. So that's what I would want to share with you. I'm definitely open to trying to answer any of your questions, but have that paper trail and think short term and long term. So if there's any, I don't know if there's any questions in the chat or if anybody wants to shoot anything my way. Can you all hear me?
Thank you so much for that. I think that you really gave some really great advice to our students. So we do have a couple questions. People were asking if you had to
Okay.
restart your hours when you moved to DC.
That is a great question. I did not, but talk about paper trail 101, because I had to prove that I was a registered intern, that an LCSW was supervising me, that I was doing clinical work. So again, thankfully, I had that paperwork ready to go. If you feel that you're a person that has a hard time with hard copy, scan it. I don't know, keep it in your Google Drive, email it to yourself, do something with it. But I was able to prove to them I was a registered intern. Here were the hours. Here's the supervision I was getting. Here are my supervision logs. And they were able to transfer that over. And then within like, I want to say 5, 6 years, I ended up getting licensed in Virginia. And I had to do the same thing. I had to dig up old supervision logs from my time in Florida. So they were like date stamped like 2008, 2007. But again, keep all of those papers. And believe it or not, full circle, I have to transfer my license back to Florida, and they're going to be asking for those same papers that I put in my Google Drive. So definitely keep that. And if you need to kind of prove your case, you'll have the content in front of you. I did not have to retake the test. I took the test, I want to say 2010, and I think that was before they made major revisions. So I can't speak to how it would be depending on what jurisdiction or what state you move to. I did, now that somebody asked that, it did jog my memory. I did work at a federal agency, and there it worked a little different because I didn't have to really move my license around. Because it's a federal agency, they cover the entire United States. So I didn't have to transfer my license. I didn't even have to think about transferring my exams. So something to think about if you decide to go the federal route, it can be a nice perk. Somebody's asking about, are the supervision forms provided on the registered intern site as well? Are they talking about the Florida site or another?
Right. In Florida, there's not a log. There's like a final form that the supervisor submits at the end when you've completed everything. It's really up to the student to, the intern to create that log and keep track of it and have their supervisor sign it. I don't think there's an official form that you're going to submit with like every single time you have supervision.
Yeah, I can make a note for myself because I have the one from DC and I have the one from Virginia. And what I ended up doing is I kind of what Renee was saying, I kind of created one for myself that had way more information than I needed. But again, it worked to my benefit because I did clinical work in Florida, DC, Virginia, and now I'm coming back. So I think it's better to have more info than to not have enough. And then you're scrambling to figure out, when did I have supervision? Did this person, who was it with? And they've moved. So again, documentation is key. But I'll get a hold of those because I think that might be a good template that you may want to use if that's the route you want to go.
Okay, so this question is, how long does it typically take to get registered as an intern once you graduate or the semester ends? I'm going to be joining a private practice as a registered clinical social work intern as soon as possible after graduation. So in order for me to start, I have to wait until the semester ends and final grades post to obtain transcripts and then figuring out a timeline. Yes, so this varies. The board is still working remotely. So I've had people say that it took a few days, and I've had people say that it takes a few months. There's always an uptick when it's around commencement time. And honestly, the spring is I feel like their hardest and most hard hit time where so many people are coming through. So if you're graduating in the summer or the fall, you may find that it doesn't take very long at all. So it could take a couple of weeks. The big thing is that the transcripts, you have to wait for that process, and that can be 4, 6, 8 weeks before your transcript reflects that your degree was conferred. So sometimes that can be a little tricky, but so you may not get your registered intern number right away to start. So so sometimes it's a matter of kind of working things out with your employer about what you can do until you get that number and get your official intern license number.
I can tell you that because our college is one for health professions, that our graduate services department certifies the degrees for people in professional programs before anyone else's. So your degrees are getting sent to the registrar's office ASAP, right after your final grades post. So you will probably get your transcript before people in other programs, but it still can take a while.
I think someone asked about, can you have different supervisors?
Yes.
And they move. Yes, I actually had three. I had three supervisors. So I had three different forms. And again, one of them moved overseas. So I'm really hoping that you learn from that experience, because I had their work email address and then they moved. So definitely get that documentation. I don't know if Renee and Adrienne, you have anything else to add
Yeah,
about that.
there's a process for changing supervisors. So you
Yes.
can have multiple at the same time. They need to contact the board in Florida anyway. They need to contact the board to tell them that they're going to be your
Hmm.
supervisor. But if you change, your new supervisor has to notify the board that they're going to be your new supervisor, and you cannot switch or see clients until the board sends the okay back that they've received that and have updated it. When you switch, you'll want to make sure that your supervisor that you're leaving signs that form with the number of hours that you completed under their supervision. So you might, like as Melissa said, submit multiple forms when you go to get licensed because you've had multiple supervisors.
Hmm. I don't know if this is applicable in all states, but I know when I was getting licensed, we also had to have copies of the supervisor's license. I think in Virginia, I didn't need that, but in DC, we did. But I think that would be a great tip if you want to write that down, because some states want to make sure that your supervisor, in fact, was licensed at the appropriate level in order to supervise you. So it may be something to consider, if especially if you think you're going to move around, to just get like a photocopy of their license.
Right. And most states, their websites have a feature where you can search for a license. So you can
Hmm.
verify that the person that you're going to be working out having be your supervisor, that their license is valid, if there's ever been any issues with their license, and then also if they're considered a qualified supervisor. So some states require
Hmm.
some sort of extra certification in order to be a supervisor. Florida is one of those states, so they do have that verification as well. So those are things that you can check on your own. I do know that you will need to enter the license number of your supervisor on your application when you say this is who's going to be my supervisor. They provide the letter, but you need to have their license, at least the license number for your own application. These are really great questions. Everybody's got some good thoughts. Do we have to have a supervisor before we submit the registered intern app? No, you don't, but you won't be approved until you have that listed. So that's how Florida does it. I always recommend there's a Facebook group that's a qualified supervisor connection. Um, and it's actually run by one of our adjunct faculty here at UCF. And they have a listing of qualified supervisors, a lot for Florida, but also for other states. And they try to connect people with supervisors, whether it's for social work, mental health counseling, or marriage and family therapy. So there's a variety. One of the nice things about that group is they have a spreadsheet and it shows the person's name, their contact info, how much they charge for supervision sessions, their specialties, and when they typically meet with their interns. There's a lot of really great information, so you can sort of kind of scope out who you think might be a good fit for you before you even reach out to them, which is kind of nice. So, and Adriana has shared the link to that in the chat for everyone.
I think also depending on where you end up working, if in-house supervision is a benefit that's offered to you or a perk, for working there, you may be able to kind of get to the front of the line in the sense that they'll say, okay, Melissa Bermudez is going to be your supervisor, and you can jot that down and put that as part of your application. What I would advise, if you will, is that if you feel that your employee assigned supervisor is not a good fit, continue to see them for supervision if it's an option in your state until you can identify a better fit. Because I have had other colleagues where they said, you know, it wasn't a good fit. This supervisor is so busy all the time, I can never see them in the office. And they decided, I'm not going to see that supervisor. So I had a former colleague lose about like 3 months of clinical hours because they were like, this is not a good fit for me. So really try to kind of, if you will, continue working with them until you can identify somebody else so that those patient contact hours, those client hours you're accruing don't get lost. I can't emphasize that enough. Your time and the input that you're giving to those clients is so important. Don't let those hours go to waste.
Melissa, there was a question about whether or not you have to pay for supervision.
Oh, so I did, and that was a choice that I made. But within my agency, they did provide supervision. But the person that they assigned to me was a road warrior. She was always out, and she was pretty honest with me and transparent and said, I'm really sorry, but the ability for us to connect is going to get jeopardized. I get called, you know, overnight calls. I do the overnight shift. It's not going to work. So I ended up paying somebody on my own. But when I transferred to a federal agency, my supervisor was really proactive in fitting that into my patient hours, if that makes sense. So like every week I had like a 3 to 4 p.m. slot, for example, blocked out on a Thursday. And that's where I would do the clinical supervision and I didn't have to pay out of pocket. So I definitely think communication is key as far as figuring out whether or not you'll have to pay. Because I can appreciate that it gets costly. It gets pretty expensive. So
And can you talk a little bit about a path to macro social work? So we've got a couple people asking about that in terms of like doing like LMSW and not necessarily going clinical. And then how can you get a job at a federal agency?
Sure. Okay, so I'll do the federal one first. I'll kind of go backwards. So I had a former classmate that pulled me into veteran affairs, and I was not licensed prior to applying. So they told me you can't really even be considered unless you are licensed at a master's level. Now, I live in Florida. You can't really get licensed at a master's level at that point. You couldn't get, there was nothing below LCSW. So they helped me do a lot of research and I got licensed in another state. And because, again, it's a federal agency, I was able to use that. They have kind of nationwide jurisdiction, if you will. So the VA is one. I had coworkers, colleagues, if you will, in DC that worked for departments of Health and Human Services. Some of them worked Department of the Army, Department of the Navy. So DOD is a really great one too. A lot of them did sexual assault response. So there's definitely room and opportunity at the federal level. They have their own social work service department. So definitely take a look at that if that's the route you want to go. And I promise you, they're not paying me for promoting that. It's just my own experience that I'm speaking of. But as far as macro social work, for me, I knew that I kind of wanted to do a combination. So I reached out to other mentors and kind of found out how they did it. And across the board, the ones I spoke to said, get your clinical license so you can open those doors. Because if you're looking at doing program level work, sometimes on grant applications, Sometimes for certain services, you need to have an LC or an LICSW next to your name. So that was the route that I took. And that was actually one of the reasons we ended up moving to DC, was because it was kind of like the hub of federal agencies and the hub of nonprofits. So I was very lucky in that macro social work was everywhere. But in your own community, I would definitely look at what agencies give you the opportunity to work from a broader lens or a broader scope. And I wouldn't necessarily limit yourself to only nonprofits. I worked for an actual like corporation. I was the only social worker on staff. And for me, that was great macro level social work experience. So just some tips to kind of think outside of the box and think about where you want to go. Somebody asked, what counts as clinical hours for supervision, i.e. case management agency versus counseling sessions? My understanding, it has to be clinical work, because case management, you could be making phone calls, doing referrals, more generalist type of work. All the work that I did was actually treatment planning, doing therapeutic interventions, doing one-on-one psychotherapy, crisis intervention, trauma resolution, etc. I don't know if Renee and
Yeah.
Adriana have anything else to add.
Florida defines it as face-to-face psychotherapy. That's what they're looking for. 1,500 hours of face-to-face psychotherapy. That's all that counts towards that.
As you say that, that jogs my memory. So when I went, when I moved to DC, theirs was 3,000 hours, which I freaked out because I was like, how am I going to do 3,000 hours? They had 1,500 hours of clinicals, what Renee was referencing. And then I had to prove I had also done like documentation time, right? So that I had written documentation, that I had assisted interdisciplinary treatment planning meetings, etc. So again, I can't emphasize enough, documentation is key, because I was able to kind of piece things together and submit that.
And can you speak a little bit about the macro social work? Like what would be a path for someone who wanted to pursue that?
I think one of the main things would be trying to narrow down what field or what subfield of macro social work you want to do, because there's so many, right? I mean, do you want to work with organizations? Do you want to work with certain communities, certain populations? And I would say having kind of your own specialization in that, or your own focus, is not a bad thing, because macro social work can be incredibly daunting if you say, well, I'm going to do it all. So what part of macro social work do you want to do? For me, I knew that I wanted to combine technology somehow with education and training. So when we moved to DC, I linked up with the NASW chapter there, and I really started to ask questions. I went to those meetings and I wanted to know, what do social workers that have to do with program development and continuing education and training, what type of positions do they hold and what are they doing? So I think that that's, again, trying to narrow down, which path do you want to take? What is it that interests you? It really needs to be something that speaks to you, that is a passion of yours, because macro social work to me can have just as high burnout rate as micro social work. There's a lot involved. So I think the more you can narrow it down, the better.
And there was a question about telehealth and how that's being handled because of COVID. So, and this varies because in some states, telehealth was already allowed. So it just varies. But for Florida, they did amend the rule to allow for telehealth to count in the hours, where previously you could do telehealth, but it didn't count in your hours requirement. However, they did specify that it cannot be over the phone. It must be that you are on video or in person so that you are seeing the person. So, and they have also allowed for supervision to be virtual. So you can do telephone or face-to-face video or in person for supervision, which is a change because of COVID. So, and those things are extended for a while. I think that the telehealth thing actually got extended for like 5 more years. So, for counting the hours, it may end up that that's permanent. But Florida's interesting. They have like somebody makes the statutes, and then somebody else has to decide how to apply those rules, and they are not the same people. So,
Mhm.
yeah, so it's the culture is different, I think, in every state. So you'll find in some states where it is just very matter of fact that you get your MSW and you get a job and they provide you with supervision, and it's very well run and it's really no big deal. And then you could be in a place like Florida where our students often get jobs. We don't really see too much issue with that, but it's a little bit harder to get a job when you're not licensed as an intern. It's a little bit harder to get those hours. They allow interns to be in private practice right out of the gate, but there's a lot of restrictions with that, where other states don't allow private practice until you have had more hours under your belt. We find most often that people are paying for supervision in Florida, just because their agencies don't necessarily have enough qualified supervisors to provide supervision for all of their employees. But I also find a lot of our social work students do manage to land jobs where they get that supervision. And then, as Melissa mentioned, they find that like it's not really working very well, or they're not challenging them, or they're just not clicking. And so they choose to get an additional supervisor and pay for that out of pocket. So it's definitely a kind of a variety across the board. And also, I think one thing that's worth paying attention to if you get involved with the NASW chapter near you, they're really working on this compact in terms of licensure. And once they get enough states signed on to that, it will become something that's law, I think federal law, but really it's about licensure portability so that you don't have to go back. If you relocate, that you would have to go back after the fact and prove all of these things that that you're eligible to be licensed. So that's something that's going to be coming down the pike for you guys when you're in the field. So definitely worth keeping an eye on, especially if you think you might move after you get your license. All right, well, we're just about out of time here. So I just want to thank Melissa for sharing all of her wisdom and knowledge with us. It was so great to have you with us and get
Thanks
to
for
see
having
you
me.
face to face. So thank you for coming. And thank you to all of you with your awesome questions. So glad to see you're all thinking about moving forward and getting licensed. And again, you can reach out to Adrienne and I for questions about commencement and submitting for transcripts and letters that you need for your licensure boards and all of that good stuff. And don't forget to send me. I will be sending you those student spotlight slides that we talked about. You will get an email from me with a reminder about that. So you can just reply to that email and send me your slide. But just be thinking about that because you've got just about 3 weeks to do it if you're graduating this summer. So
And I'll be sending out the recording from today later this afternoon.
yay, thank you, Adriana. Will you send the PowerPoint too?
Absolutely.
Awesome. Thank you.
Thank you, Melissa.
Thanks,
everybody.
everybody.